Hi. Tonight we're going to be talking with Susan Friedlander, and she is the author of Marguerite, Misty and Me. And she also has a couple of other books to her credit. And she is going to talk to us today about the book uh, about Marguerite Henry and Misty, her uh, pony from Chincoteague. Um, we are going to record it so that it will be on the website. And a really neat thing is that Susan will be at our show, which is the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. She will be there the afternoon of the 22nd and the 23rd. So if you would like to get a autographed book, that's the way to get it. So I'm going to turn this over to Susan and let her introduce herself and the backstory on how she started with this, and then we can get started.
Thank you, Molly. This is really fun. And I love talking about horses. And I especially love talking about Marguerite Henry and Misty and books and all of that. My background, I was a horseless child, much to my chagrin, but I was introduced to horses through the books of Marguerite Henry that I checked out at the Gale Borden Library in Elgin. I grew up in South Elgin, Illinois. And when I was a friend that parents met through small town politics changed my life because this woman named Cindy lived in Wayne and she had field hunters in her backyard. And she said, "Oh, your daughter wants to ride? Have her come on out." And so I did, had maybe a few riding lessons. Of course, this was before there were helmets. I mean, I had a hunt cap, but we all know those didn't really protect our heads too much. But I just got to ride in the fields and down the prairie path and all this glorious area. And, no cell phones, no GPS, just let my mom drop me off and I would go off riding with other girls that were around my age. And we just had a blast. So that was a long time ago. Flash forward, I grew up, I became an adult, and I was a history and English teacher for my career. And I taught mostly in Southern California and a couple years in Chicago in Rogers Park. So you can see me there as a little girl with my hobby horse. And then that photo in the middle is my first show horse, and his name was DC, and I rode Hunter Jumpers. That's actually at Lamplight. And I had him for 16 years. And then my current horse is there. His name is Tis a Knight, and I'm learning dressage. And as you can see, I have a type because that's not the same horse, but they look a lot alike. So this is going to be a really casual kind of conversation. If I seem harried and scattered, it's because this has been my day. I am releasing a young reader version of Marguerite, Misty and Me, and I'm going to launch it at Briarfest next month in Kentucky. And then I've been invited back to Chincoteague Island for the pony penning week, and I'm going to do a talk there. So I've just been on the computer all day and then on paper doing edits, and it's kind of crazy. So I hope I'm not too scattered, but I just really appreciate you being here. So this was a little photo shoot we did recently, and the barn cat, I mean, we could not have planned this. It was just one of those things that's like, this is amazing. Thank you, Kat, for making this photo super cute. I'll probably put this on social media. But before I wrote Marguerite, Misty and Me, I had questions. You see, back in 2018, I found my childhood copy of Misty of Chincoteague and I reread it for the first time as an adult. And now this time, I'm an educator. I read lots of books. I read a lot of kids' books with my students, 6th and 7th graders. And there was just something so mesmerizing about Misty of Chincoteague. And it really took my breath away. And so I started thinking, I know that Marguerite Henry lived in Wayne. And now she wasn't there, when I was riding horses back in the 80s. By this time, she had moved to Southern California. But again, I'm a history teacher, and I would tell my students, like, you need to talk to your grandparents, ask them what school was like when they were your age, ask them, what they did for fun, and did they have a job when they were young, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of took my own advice, and I thought I need to try to find people who are around who might remember Marguerite and could tell me a little bit more about this person. I posted the Misty book on Instagram. This was a graffiti wall near my friend's neighborhood in Los Angeles when I was in Southern California. And then I wrote a blog post about rereading Misty, and it was like a snowball that just kept getting bigger, and it continues to keep getting bigger now that the book's out even. But then I started fox hunting. That's my horse Knight. And who knew there was fox hunting in Southern California? I didn't until I encountered this wonderful huntsman on the far left there. And I was invited out, and I'm kind of a timid amateur. Like, I'm not a scared rider, but I like to know what my footing is. I like to make sure I have my horse under control. I'm not one of those just get on and go. Like, I can never be an eventer. But anyway, so this is, my horse Knight is an off-track thoroughbred. He had some training in that. He's just got a good brain. And they were like, oh, you could bring your horse out. He'd be fine. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not the kind of rider that just hops on their horse and happens to take them fox hunting. But I did. And he was fine. It was amazing. I didn't jump, but I went in third field, and he behaved like a true gentleman. So while I was on the fox hunt, I was starting to have more questions about Marguerite, because I knew where the house was in Wayne, and I knew it's across the street from a fox hunt, the Wayne DuPage hunt. So I started wondering, was she an equestrian like me? Did she take riding lessons? Did she go to horse shows? Or was she more of a horse lover from the ground? Who was she before she was a famous author? Was she a teacher? Like, I knew nothing about her. All I knew is that I loved her books. So therefore I loved her. Then I was thinking, maybe I could find some of her children, or maybe grandchildren, friends and family. Spoiler alert, she never had children. And then I was trying to figure out, why is it that her books have such an enduring hold on people? I meet people, and, we start talking about Misty, and it's like we all get kind of choked up about how beautiful these stories were and still are. And then I kind of went down the rabbit hole of trying to understand what it is about Chincoteague ponies. And this set me off on a 2-year research journey. Oh, by the way, here's my cringy picture. This is me with the borrowed 25-year-old quarter horse, Jim Dandy in Wayne, with the said hunt cap that wasn't really protective by any means. But another cool place to start for me was, I'm going to go back in time a little. When I was in high school, my mom worked with a woman who, she must have said, I have this daughter that's just nuts about horses, and, she reads. And anyway, so her friend Mary Ellen said, oh, I rode the Misty pony when I was a little girl. And so she brought this photo of the real Misty pony to my mom. And then we asked if we could make a copy of it, because that's just how nerdy I was about it. I had to have a picture of this famous pony. And so again, what's really special is, and it's not just for me, I know Marguerite introduced many people to the horse world before we had a way to get there on our own. Well, when I started thinking about this, I was living in Southern California, and then through a turn of events, which you could read about in the book, and family changes, I was going to be relocating back to the Chicago area. So like 2 days before I left, I was like, I have to go to Rancho Santa Fe. And this is near San Diego. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. It's like a 2-hour drive. And I go to the library, and I walk in, and I'm kind of unsure of myself, because I don't think of myself as a true historian. I was a history teacher, and I've written books, but nothing of this nature. So I go into the Rancho Santa Fe library, and I'm kind of shy. I'm doing research on Marguerite Henry. She used to live here. Does anyone here remember her? And so they said, oh, well, we have photo albums you can look at. So they kind of sent me off to a corner with those old school photo albums that like you peel the page off and there's pictures in there. So it was like a needle in a haystack, but I did find images of Marguerite doing book signings in that. And so then about 45 minutes into this, another librarian comes in and says, would you like to see our private Marguerite Henry collection? And I said, why, yes, I would. So she took me to this back room and there was original art. This is from Gaudenzia. It was also titled The Wildest Horse Race in the World. And there were just a number of things there. The pictorial life story of Misty. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. It's kind of the backstory of Marguerite's relationship with Misty. Little Misty postcard. And I thought this was just darling. So Marguerite's apology note to the Rancho Santa Fe Library because she kept one of their books too long. And then I mentioned earlier, the Gail Borden Library is where I grew up checking out the Marguerite Henry books. Well, wouldn't you know it? That's the library where she did her research when she lived in Wayne. And I did a program at the Gail Borden Library, and one of the librarians was like, oh, I found an old photo from our library, and it features Marguerite Henry's works there. So this is from the Gail Borden Library in Elgin. Then I found out the University of Minnesota has her entire collection of personal papers. And I didn't really know what to expect. I just knew they had 36 boxes. And so I thought this sounds kind of like a treasure hunt. And I had to reserve the boxes ahead of time. And I made this, I'm not a spreadsheet person really. I made a spreadsheet because I wanted to start with the Misty and the King of the Wind materials. And then if time allowed, I was doing it by day. You know, maybe I'll look at some of her more obscure titles. And it was just such a treat to see Marguerite's letters, unpublished manuscripts. This is some Wesley Dennis art there. I didn't know what book it was from, and I've since found out it wasn't a Marguerite Henry book, but it's called Fools Over Horses. And I just hope that that's like the mean girl in the kid's story. Marguerite wrote and wrote and wrote. She wrote from the time actually she was a little girl. She had an article published in a women's magazine, and she was writing into her 90s. I think she's an excellent model for how to live. She didn't believe in retirement. But anyway, this was a little sad to me, but I'm glad I got to see it. There was a whole book for miniature horses, and it never saw the light of day. There was a whole fiasco with the group that wanted to publish it. And so I thought I could help out. And I told the curator of the collection, I said, you know, there's a lot of people who still like Marguerite Henry. You guys should definitely publish the mini horse book because people would buy it. And she told me that Marguerite's wishes were that none of her work would be published after her death. But she also wanted to publish a story about this gentleman who lived in Chicago. He was homeless, but he had a pet duck. And her editor rejected that idea and said, you know, children who read the book will want to have ducks as pets. And we all know that ducks are very messy. So she probably was good to stay in her lane with horses. I got to hold her Newbery medal for King of the Wind, and the pencil is there for scale. I tried not to squeal in the middle of this academic library. I know there were people nearby probably reading medieval manuscripts and that, and I was fangirling out. Here's Wesley Dennis from King of the Wind, and it was just, I mean, such a treat to be able to see this art in real life. And I thought this was very interesting. Now, obviously, I'm a writer, and so I wanted to kind of learn her techniques, you know, what were her methods. She wrote on everything, and I mean everything, the old calendars. So what's really cute about this, her maiden name was Bright Hop. Her father was a printer. So this is a calendar from her dad's company. And these are notes that were in the King of the Wind file. So you can see that she's just jotting down notes on the backs of calendars pages. One of the most interesting places I saw her writing notes was, you know how if you get a new tablecloth, there's like a cardboard insert that kind of keeps it nice and stiff so that the package looks all perfectly rectangular. She started writing stuff on the back of one of those. You may recognize this. Now, here's what I thought was really cool. When I first saw this early Misty draft and I noticed the map, I was thinking for sure, probably a Chincoteague local drew this, because how would you draw, like, she wasn't a trained cartographer, you know, she didn't have Google Earth. How would you do this map that's so detailed of such a small place, you know? But anyway, I have since had a chance to speak at the Museum of Chincoteague, and the leading, like the main director there knows all the history. And I had a theory as to who did this map, and I gave it to Cindy Faith, as the woman's name at the museum. And she said, it's not Victoria Pruitt's writing. She said, have you ruled out the possibility that that is Marguerite's work? So I think it is Marguerite. And there she is. This is in Wayne. She had a 2-acre plot called Mole Meadow. The house is still there. And if you're familiar with the area, there's the castle on Dunham Road, like kind of across the street from that is a sign that commemorates Misty. That's not the real place where Misty lived, but it's nice that they have that. And here she is this is Jigs, her burrow that she borrowed from a farmer. She actually leased it so that she could study for Bridie the Grand Canyon. And then you can see Misty in the background there. And then the black horse is her Morgan Friday. So I kind of love her progression of acquiring equines. So, and the other thing I love about Marguerite, she always wanted a horse. I can identify with that. She wasn't able to get her first horse until she was a middle-aged woman. She was in her mid-40s, and the horse she got was the pony we all fell in love with, Misty. But Misty was a foal, so she couldn't ride. Her husband, Sydney, liked to golf. They would go to Florida in the winters. And Sydney, I guess while he was golfing, she found a polo grounds and was watching, and then approached one of the men playing polo and said, I would really like to learn how to ride a horse. Will you teach me? And so she learned how to ride a polo pony, and it was a Morgan, which I think that's interesting because I don't think of Morgans as polo ponies, but I guess they're very versatile and they're smaller and fast. But so she fell in love with Friday, and she reasoned with her husband that they really should have this other horse, Friday, because Misty was lonely. And then so she goes from the pony to the horse. And then when she decides to write the story of Bridie, she needs to have this, you know, donkey. So I think I only have one horse because that's all I can afford. But I know some people go down the path of first the one, then the second, then the donkey. The Milwaukee County Historical Society also was a treasure trove. She was born in 1902 in a German neighborhood. The house is no longer there, but the whole street is like, you know, Victorian homes from the era. But an archivist there was very wonderful and helped me find yearbooks that she was in. She was definitely in leadership roles in school, in the literary society, president of the Bible study club, into theater and acting and all of that. And this building is just so beautiful. The archives, if you haven't been and you go to Milwaukee, it was like the former business bank for all the beer barons. That was a lot of B's in that sentence. But it's just so ornate and gorgeous. And they have a lot of Marguerite info. There she is as a little girl. And she was the youngest of 5 children. Her older sister, this is her nephew, the little boy there. So her older sister was quite a bit older and married young to a man that had children. And presumably his wife died. But so this is not the house where she lived, but you can see the driveway there is is where her house had been. So it gives you a taste of the character. Here she is in the middle as a beautiful bride to be. And she was definitely into clothes, and she looked nice. Even people I interviewed that talked about, like, there was, and in magazine, or sorry, newspaper articles I read, there was kind of always a comment on how she was attired. And this is the church where she married her husband. She met her husband in Minocqua. They were fishing. They were each both with their families fishing, and they met, and it was love at first sight. And then after they married, they moved to Chicago, and this is where things kind of took off with her writing. The story is told that she and her husband received 5 lamps as wedding gifts. And because Marguerite didn't have the heart to return any of the lamps and thus hurt people's feelings that she returned their gift, she bought 5 tables. And her husband thought this was excessive, and she said, "Okay, don't worry, I'll get a job." So, she had her high school yearbook experience, and, like I said, she had an article published when she was around 10 or 11. And so she's in the big city, goes up to a publisher's office and basically says, "I need a job. I will write a story for you. If you don't like it, you don't have to pay me." And so he sent her on assignment to the grand opening of the American Furniture Mart, which the building still exists. At the time, it was one of the tallest buildings in the world. And today it's part of Northwestern's medical campus in the Gold Coast area. So I was also wondering if I could find any of Marguerite's friends, and I did. So this wonderful gem of a human, Bonnie Shields, is 83, and she was Marguerite's last illustrator. And Bonnie is known, she's done art for decades based on mules, and Marguerite's last book was called Brown Sunshine of Sawdust Valley. And so Bonnie, I haven't met her in person yet. I hope I get to. She lives in Idaho, but she said Marguerite was the real deal. And even in the 90s, she would get fan mail, and she kept changing it out in her office. She would put it up on the wall, the letters, the pictures children would draw, and that she just was, and that Bonnie had grown up reading Marguerite Henry books and was just ecstatic when she was told, "Hey, there's someone who'd like to work with you and have you do illustrations." And then she ended up sculpting a Breyer model of the mule from that story too. The other thing that really stood out to me when I was researching in Minnesota with all the 36 boxes at the Curlin collection is the broad base of fans that Marguerite had. It just across generations and decades, you can just see represented by the style of photography, the style of clothes and hair, and that she just had so many fans. And she was very active in going out and meeting children. And I don't know if anyone here ever got to meet her. I did not have the opportunity, but when I speak to people who've met her as a fan, like just in a line of trying to get an autograph, and that, the things that are common to their stories is that she looked them in the eye, she engaged with them, she asked them, what book they liked, did they have a horse? She was just a very genuine person with a true heart. So one of the best aspects of writing this book was, I knew that I could probably adequately tell the story of Marguerite as a Midwesterner, and as her later years, she lived in California. So I kind of have that part because I grew up in the Midwest and I was in California for 25 years, 20 of them teaching middle school. So I didn't know anything about Chincoteague culture, the ponies. I know about the Wild Swim from the book. So I went by myself for the first time 2 years ago to Pony Penny Week, and it was for research. And I wanted my sister to go, who's a teacher. She had time off in the summer. I wanted my nephew to go, who's an excellent videographer, and like no one could go. Boo hoo, woe is me. So I went, and the cool thing was I was not a stranger. It was like summer camp for horse lovers. I'm more of an introverted person. I don't typically meet a person and instantly give them my cell phone number, but that all of that was different on Chincoteague Island. It was kind of amazing. So here is a view of the pony swim. I was in a kayak. I did not take these photos. My friend, someone I met on the island I became friends with, Rebecca, she lives in Minnesota, took these photos. I had a different angle, but it was really cool because in the kayak, I was able to get up so close. The ponies were probably like 30 feet from me, and my kayak kind of swayed, and you could hear them as they're going through the water. And everyone's so happy. I mean, it's like New Year's, I've been, because I lived in Southern California, to the Rose Bowl parade many times. There's just such a feeling of excitement and just joy and enthusiasm, and it's that way with these ponies. Then, of course, the ponies are paraded through town, and people stand along to watch. And then this was a different day, but there's a woman about 30 minutes from Chincoteague off the island. Her name is Kendi. She has the largest herd of Chincoteague ponies, second only to the Chincoteague Volunteer Fire Company that owns the ponies that are on Chincoteague Island, the Virginia side. So this pony is Misty 3. She is a descendant of the actual Misty pony that was born in 1946, and she's beautiful. And so Kendi has been very active with 4-H. She's a retired school librarian, and her goal is to get kids with ponies and kids with horses. And right now, so this drill team, they're wonderful. The drill team was invited to perform at Kentucky Horse Park. And so they're doing fundraisers, and like during the Christmas season, they do like 6 parades in the area, like Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware. And so she's just a gem. One of the things I learned that not a lot of people know is, in addition to the July pony roundup and swim, they round them up in the spring and the fall also, just to kind of check them out and to give vaccinations, see if they have any cuts or, physical conditions. The volunteer firefighters, the ponies are what drive tourism. They're so beloved. Like one of the stallions, I have a photo later. Oh, can I go back? The stallion right here, his name's Riptide. He's beautiful sorrel. Reminds me of Fabio. He has a private Facebook group with 3,700 fans in it. And he's quite a character. But this is at the corral, I believe. So the ponies, the whole week of Pony Penny Week, if you would like to go, there's something that happens every day of the week. So the Monday is a beach walk, and the northern herd is rounded up and they parade along the shore of the Atlantic. So you got to get there early. So you'll see the beautiful sunrise and then the ponies. And then they meet up with the southern herd in these large corrals. And so the ponies have veterinary attention. Everyone gets looked at to make sure they're okay to do the swim. And if there are foals that are too young, maybe older horses that are just maybe not thriving, or mares that are too pregnant, they won't make them do the swim. They will be trailered from Assateague over to Chincoteague Island for the carnival and everything. So I took my mom, and this was kind of fun. So we went last fall. So I've been the last 2 pony pennings. I'm going again this year, but she and I went for the fall roundup, and we were on the beach, and this other 2 daughters and a mom close in age to us came over, and they said, "Would you take our picture?" And I said, "Okay." And the woman who handed me her phone's name was Misty. And so I said, "Oh, Misty," because she said, "Yeah." So they were there celebrating her mother had just gotten over breast cancer. So it's just such a special place for people. So those original questions that were haunting me, was she an equestrian like me or a horse lover from the ground? I think both. There's no evidence that she fox hunted or horse rode. I do know she took a few lessons at least with the polo trainer, and I know that she would write from about 8 to 1 when she lived in Wayne, and then head out for a ride. Who was she before she was a famous author? She was a very hardworking magazine writer. She ghost wrote a lot, and that was something that was a little frustrating because, in the time, in the 20s and that, she did a series for Saturday Evening Post on the lives of famous men. And these are household names like Morton from The Salt, Kohler, like I can't think of the other ones right now, but I tried to find those articles and I can't. So some of the stuff is lost to time. There've been a lot of really cool discoveries too. One of the things that I learned about her that I was delighted, and in my young reader version of Marguerite, Misty and Me that's coming out, I have pictures. So this version for adults, now I didn't realize that people wanted to see pictures so much, but as a teacher, I'm doing a younger version, fewer words, and it's going to have a lot of pictures. Well, wouldn't you know, in the late 60s, by this time, Marguerite didn't have any more horses. She donated a Spanish Mustang filly along with her illustrator, Bob Lougheed. They did, if you remember the book Mustang, Wild Spirited West. I don't think I have it here right now. But anyway, I found letters that were talking about how excited they were to purchase Spanish Mustangs and donate them to Oklahoma City's National Cowboy Hall of Fame and Western Museum, because they wanted children to have a chance to see and, probably not touch, but to see and to smell and to learn about these wild horses. And so I reached out to the archives at that museum and they said, we have archives, but it's not very organized. So I just said, well, I believe that you had some ponies there and Marguerite Henry donated one. Could you please, please, please try to find something for me? And they did. They found a photo of and there's no denying it, because my editor kind of pushed back on me like, well, you don't know. And I said, I read it in a letter that Marguerite was excited. It gave the price of what they paid the rancher for the Spanish Mustang. And they talked about trailering it to Oklahoma City. Like, she wasn't making this up. This was a personal letter. And so it was very gratifying. And in the photo, there's a huge sign and it says gift from Marguerite Henry and Bob Lougheed to the museum. And so that's really cool. But I think the reason her books have such an enduring hold is that they're true. Even though her books are classified as fiction, they're true stories. There's some artistic license, and she even said she was not a very imaginative person, and that when she wrote Bridie of the Grand Canyon, by golly, she went to the Grand Canyon and rode a mule down and hiked up and was even tasting the little plants and grasses so she would know how to describe it in her book. She was into immersion journalism. I don't know if it was considered a thing back then, but they're true. She wrote with her audience in mind. She wasn't trying to be impressive, and she kind of, and people I've talked to said she had a childlike quality herself, and just a heart of empathy in that. So I think that's what makes the books have such an enduring hold. I don't remember if I shared this because I'm a little harried from all the editing, but she never had children, so no grandchildren. But I was able to find, like Bonnie was saying, she considered any of the children who read her book or interacted with her to be part of her family in a way. And so I did have an opportunity to meet a gentleman who grew up in Wayne, and actually his first job was getting paid to ride Misty of Chincoteague on trail with Marguerite Henry. So I talk about that in the book. And since then, I have a picture I'll show you of someone else I met. But the appeal of the wild ponies and the story of Misty is that something that it's true and it's real and it's still happening. Next year will be the 100th anniversary of the wild pony penning. And I don't know if I'm going because I'll be really crazy then, but it's just, I can't think of any other event that is just so joy infused. And I've been to a lot of horse events. I write for magazines and that. I've been as media to some of the top show jumping or like the, Kentucky 3-day and that. And I love all of that. But there's something about this pony penning week and seeing the auction where, after the swim, the people are bidding on foals. And it's just like, oh, there's so much joy in just a pony. And, it doesn't matter what style of writing you do or how big your bank account is, or it's not an import, it's like this child joy of a horse, of connecting with a horse because they're cool and they're beautiful and we can tell them our secrets. So I've said a lot. I have a little bit more to share with you, but I get going and I'm so excited about it. So I was curious if you had any questions for me about Marguerite, about Misty, about Chincoteague ponies. You can ask me personal questions. I'm an open book. Yeah.
Hi. Okay. Hi, I'm Susan Parker. In preparation for this evening, I had an extra 20 minutes before we started, so I was rooting through my collection of Marguerite Henry books. And I frequented used book sales at libraries for years. I went to high school at St. Ed's Catholic School in Elgin. So about 20 years ago, I was at the Gail Borden used book sale. And I bought the album of horses, and it has to be the one you checked out because it started being checked out in the mid-70s. So
well, it would be more 80s. I was born in 70s.
But this started in the 70s and it goes on and on.
Oh, that's amazing.
So I think you should have this.
Oh.
When I'm going to try and meet up with you at the IDCTA show on the 22nd or 23rd. It's really battered. Kids have crayoned in it. But I felt so bad when I saw it at the book sale. I thought, I just can't let this thing get thrown away. It's all beat up on the corners, but you should have it. So
thank you. That's very special. Wow. I'm blown away. That's very nice.
Yeah, I think I paid 50 cents for it.
Oh, okay. I'll pay you $1. It's probably appreciated.
Yeah. But thanks for a great presentation this evening. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, I have a few more things, unless we have other questions. All right, so I would love your help. I'm going to show you, I've got a prop. Did you guys know there's an American Writers Museum in Chicago?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, have you been?
No.
Okay, well, I recommend it highly. So I picked this up here. It looks terrible now. This is the author of The Yearling, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. And the American Writers Museum is honoring her by this did look nice the day I got it. I probably shoved it in the bottom of my purse or something. But it was interesting to me as I went around that they had a whole, section for children's authors. And Marguerite not only won the Newbery Medal for King of the Wind, she won the Newbery Honor twice, once for Misty, once for Justin Morgan Had a Horse. She won other awards as well. They had a section for women writers. She was a trailblazing woman writer. They had a section for local authors. And I was a little miffed and I was trying not to take it personally. And this is before I started writing the book. And I just went up to the front desk, and I know like the kid working the front desk doesn't have any control over what is in the museum. But I just said, "Where's Marguerite Henry? Do you know who that is?" And they're like, "No." And I was like, "Well, you should." I may have been a little bit snarky, but I have reached out to them. I have told them I would like to present there and that I would love to meet. Like, I don't know the right people to connect with to get in there, but it's a shame that granted, Wayne, Illinois is not Chicago, but she did live in Chicago and she wrote children's books. She also lived in Naperville for a while. She's clearly a Chicago area writer. And the fact that, let's see, she died in 97, 30 years later. And Misty, the Briar Misty, you could probably see right there. like that's one of their top selling models. And it came out in 1972. And the fact that people are bidding the ponies, the highest bid pony last year was over $40,000. And and the low bid was 1,800. And some of them, like the ones that they buy back to then re-release on the island, go for more because people do basically like a syndicate and then they get naming rights. But it's like, I've met people that said, oh, I got married on Chincoteague. And, people that got engaged on Chincoteague, and people, the family that they were there with their mother when she overcame breast cancer. And so this place is really something. And the whole effort with like the BB Ranch, I don't know if you heard that. So the ranch where Misty was born, she was not born a wild pony, but the BBs from the story that are fictional characters in the story were real people, and that ranch was being sold. And so people came together on Facebook and the GoFundMe, and all of these horse lovers, people who've been touched by these stories, banded together and purchased the ranch. And then it's been donated to the Museum of Chincoteague. And so it's like, I talked to the director of the museum, and she said they'd read these letters, they'd get a check for $5, and these letters that were like, Misty got me through my childhood. And she said they were crying like the whole time as they're reading these letters, collecting these checks. So I would love your help in keeping this story trotting along. If you have other events that you know of or book clubs, I would love to come and speak. I'm going to kind of close with this story. This was very special to me, and I'm going to try not to cry. But the first time I told this, it had just happened last year when the book came out, and I was in an audience at the Chincoteague Library, and it was mostly retired educators and librarians. So this young woman, my book launched at Briarfest last year. And I don't know if you've been to Briarfest. It's a mind-blowing experience, and it's not just plastic horses. It is we could have a whole nother talk, but look it up if you're not familiar with Briarfest. But anyway, so I was there with this bookstore and my big launch of Marguerite, Misty and Me. And this young woman came over to me, because people our age, people of a certain age, they know Misty. And so some of the younger people are like, oh, yeah, no, I haven't heard of that. And I'll be like, Chincoteague, the pony swimming. Oh, yeah, I think my mom had that book. But this young woman saw my Misty model, saw the book, came over and was like, oh, Misty. And she said, when I was in 4th grade, I hated reading. This is where I get choked up. And then my teacher gave me Misty of Chincoteague, and I read it, and I read all the other books. And I'm a reader today. And I just think that's so beautiful. And this man here, this is cute. So I'm doing a similar talk at my local library in Huntley. It's actually the same, it's the morning of the show. So I'm going to come straight to the show when I get done, because I had this planned probably 9 months ago. Wish I could be 2 places at once. But anyway, so this gentleman's name is Roy. And that's his wife on the far right, and a woman who does a book club at the Huntley Library. And she said, you have to meet Roy. He grew up in Wayne. He remembers Misty and Marguerite. And so we met at a local Starbucks, and they wanted to buy the book, and I did. And he is 83. He told me hilarious stories about growing up in Wayne and Misty. And he wasn't in Marguerite's inner circle of the children that were there all the time, but he went to pony birthday parties she hosted at the house. And I had this book, the pictorial life story of Misty, and I open it up. I probably won't be able to find the right picture. But there's this picture of the birthday party. And so I showed it to him, and I'm like, have you seen this? And he looks and he's like, oh, that's me. He's like, yeah, I'm the kid with the striped shirt. And so, we talked, and it was wonderful. And then his wife texted me later and said that he'd been going through some health issues and had been kind of down, and it made his day to get to meet me and to learn more about his hero. And so that was just so special. And yeah, so if you could tell your friends, or even if you have ins, I'm in some tack shops. I do wholesale to stores and that, or if you have a book club or anything, or if you want to buy my book. This is my friend Rebecca that I was telling you about that lives in Minnesota, and this is her pony. MacGyver is his name, and he's a Misty descendant, and he's adorable. And she has a mare that's about to foal, and she thinks it's going to be a Palomino Pinto. I'm 5'9". And these ponies are around 13, 14 hands, and she texted me. She's like, Susan, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be nice if you had a Palomino Pinto Chincoteague pony? And I texted her back. I said, I can think of all the reasons that is a fantastic idea and all the reasons it is a terrible idea. But I would love to connect with you. I have other books. I don't know if you're into QR codes, but I have a free download so you can get like the first, I think it's the first and second chapter of each of my books if you would like. And then the other thing is I have a blog. So saddleseekshorse.shop is my Shopify store. And I have my editor, we kind of went at it because I would find these little nuggets of information about Marguerite, and she'd be like, Susan, you can't put that in there. I'm like, but it's so interesting. People will love it. She's like, yes, but it takes away from the storyline. So I have a lot of like deleted scenes. I also I'm an independent author, and I knew maybe a New York publisher wouldn't think this is much of a story, but that there's people out there that want to know more about a woman who meant so much to them. So I just really am thriving on grassroots support and that, but also because my background's education, I have a lot of people that are like, I've always thought of writing a book. And I'm like, you need to do it. You need to do it. So I have a blog post about why you should write your own horse book. And I have a course too that is going to start up again in the fall. But thank you for trotting along. There's a lot of people that I have to thank. I won't read them all off, but it's been a group effort for sure. And it's humbling. And yeah, if I can be like 1/10 of the writer that Marguerite was, I will be very happy with that. So, and that's my horse night. That's my last screen. So yeah, thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it. And I will be excited to meet those of you who are going to come to the horse show. And don't be a stranger. You can also, I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and it's not my author name. It's Saddle Seeks Horse, which it's kind of a long story, but you can follow what my handsome thoroughbred knight. Oh, that's a photo that Joseph took, Molly, the photographer for the show, the one of Knight.
Oh, really? That's great.
Yeah. So the problem is my horse, he's gorgeous. He does not like to put his ears forward. So that like,
Oh, that's
I wish his
great.
ears were more forward, but it was like good enough.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
I
we're
have-
looking for,
I-
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have one quick question for you. Are you finding that the kids are rediscovering Misty of Chicoteague or Marguerite?
Well, so what I find is it's kind of a generational thing. So there's some little kids that they know it because their mom or their grandma has read it to them. So like, for example, there's a toy store at World Equestrian Center in Ocala, and they've got a wall full of briars, and they've got Misty and the
I've seen that.
book and the
Yes.
briar set and all that.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
actually, if any of you have an in with Briar, I am kind of pitching them the idea of my young reader version of doing a set. So it would be this with Marguerite's Morgan Horse Friday and Misty and a Brighty, but like smaller scale, like the medium-sized horses. And so I'm going to just keep, I've heard that in order to get something done, because there's a lot of people, like my trainer, Jennifer Rousseau, a stallion that she managed had a briar made of him. So I know it's not impossible, but I think I have to be like the squeaky wheel. But and it's not about me. It's because I want to keep preserving the good writing, a woman who was an amazing person. Because when I started out, was like, what if she's really a terrible human? And then everyone I talked to, she got better and better, like donating a horse. And someone even told me, and I can't verify it, so maybe I shouldn't even say it, but that she bought a horse farm for someone that's in St. Charles. It was like someone that helped her. And I could see her doing that if she had the means to do that. So I need to go to the county recorder of deeds office and verify that. But yeah, I over answered your question. But so
That's
the intent, when I went to Chincoteague, that time you saw the photo of my mom and I on the beach and we watched the fall roundup, I was invited to speak at the elementary school. And it was a thrill because I had just been out of the classroom a year at that time. And they had me come talk to the 4th and 5th graders. And I was so excited because I was, they all know about the ponies because that's what they live. And then I was telling them about the woman behind the book. And a little girl raised her hand and said, I would like to read your book. And my heart sank because not that there's anything objectionable. It's squeaky clean for the most part. But it's just too long that, the words are too sophisticated in that. So that is what inspired me to write the young reader version, is because I want to tell about her. And honestly, some of the chapters are really a good how-to be a good writer, like her research methods and the way she organized her ideas and all of that. So my goal is to have this book to not only get the horse kids, but also have a point where I could potentially go into schools and do workshops on research. Because like the last few years I was in the classroom, I was talking to my English colleague, I was teaching 7th grade, and I was like, are you teaching research? And she's like, we just don't have time. You'll need to do that. So it scares me, and especially in the age of AI and that, like there's some knowledge that is offline that will never be digitized, that you can only find out by looking at something tangible or having a conversation with the person. So yeah, I'm fired up. But yeah, so I'm hoping, yeah. So my goal is Briarfest with the young reader version, but not just horse kids. I want to go big to whatever degree I can as an indie author, just to reach kids. And our industry is shrinking, and some of that may be just we don't have the exposure to horses because of urban sprawl and that. And so if I can have another horse book, although I did have a conversation with a Barnes and Noble employee in Algonquin, and she said, we always get people coming in asking us for horse books for their kids. So I don't know. And if you go look at the horse books, they're the same horse books we read.
So nothing new, obviously.
Not really. I mean, there's some, and then I've had some parents that are like, I don't like there's some series in that, but it's like kind of Mean Girl and, so, yeah. So
Well,
if you
thank
would
you.
like to write horse books, go for it, because it's a wide open market.
Okay, duly noted.
Good to know. Good to know. I want to thank you so much for this wonderful talk. And when you come to the show, we'll connect, because I think I may be able to help you with a couple of exposure areas. Okay.
Excellent. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so are there any other questions from anyone? We all thank you for being here. We all thank you for this wonderful talk. And we're looking forward to meeting you in at the show.
Yeah. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it a lot.
Appreciate it.
All right. Goodbye.